It was a quiet night, the kind that feels ordinary until Benjamin Rogers, living alone at the edge of the forest, heard a knock at his door that would change his life forever. What he saw next was something no one could prepare for. A female Bigfoot, exhausted and wounded, carrying her dying baby. She didn't roar, she didn't attack, she came seeking help. Benjamin had a choice, and what he did in that moment would defy everything anyone thought they knew about the wild. And the power of trust. Stay with us, because this encounter is not just unbelievable, it's deeply emotional. And the ending will leave you completely speechless. Benjamin Rogers was 65 years old and had learned how to live without noise. His small house sat at the edge of the forest, far enough from town that the nights stayed dark and the mornings arrived without interruption. He had lived there for years, long enough for the land to recognize him as part of its routine. He woke before sunrise, not because he had to, but because his body no longer slept late. Coffee first. Then a slow walk around the property, checking the fence line, listening to the woods the way other men listen to the radio. After that, simple work chopping wood, repairing what time had worn down, keeping things in order. There was comfort in repetition. Benjamin had been widowed for a long time. He did not speak much about it. The house held the quiet of a life that had already said most of what needed to be said. He wasn't lonely in the way people imagined. Solitude, when lived long enough, stopped feeling empty. It became steady. The forest had taught him that. He respected it, and it seemed, in its own way, to respect him back. He never took more than he needed. Never left a mess behind. He knew the trails, the animal signs, the way weather moved through the trees. He paid attention to the people in town. Benjamin was just the old man near the woods, polite, reserved, forgettable, and that suited him fine. Nothing about his life suggested it would ever change. And that was exactly how he believed it would remain. It was still dark when the sound came. Not the deep night, but that uncertain hour just before dawn, when the world holds its breath. Benjamin was awake, sitting at the small kitchen table, his coffee cooling beside him. The house was quiet, the way it always was at that hour. Then he heard it, a single, heavy knock. It wasn't loud, but it carried weight. Not the sharp rattle of a branch or the careless thump of the wind. This was slow, measured, intentional. Benjamin didn't move right away. He listened. Years of living near the forest had taught him the difference between random noise and something that meant to be noticed. The sound came again, steady, controlled. Whoever, or whatever, was outside knew where the door was. He felt a tightening in his chest, but it wasn't fear. It was awareness. Something was wrong. He could sense it in the way the woods had gone still. In the absence of the usual early morning sounds. Benjamin stood and reached for the lantern by the door. He didn't rush. Panic had never helped anyone, and it wasn't his nature. He turned the handle slowly, just enough to look through the small window beside the frame. All he could see was darkness and the faint outline of trees. The knock came a third time, closer now. Right against the wood, Benjamin placed his hand on the door, steadying himself. Whatever was waiting outside wasn't trying to force its way in. It was waiting. After a long breath, he unlatched the door and pulled it open, carefully, ready for whatever the forest had chosen to bring to him. The lantern's light fell forward in a narrow arc, and for a moment, Benjamin couldn't make sense of what he was seeing. His mind searched for something familiar: an injured animal, a lost hiker, a shadow shaped by fatigue. None of it fit. She stood just beyond the threshold, tall enough that her head brushed the low overhang of the porch. Her body was broad and heavy, covered in dark matted fur that clung to her frame, as if weighed down by days of rain and travel. She did not move when the light reached her. She only stood there, breathing slowly, as though holding herself upright took effort. This was no creature caught mid-charge or poised to flee. This was exhaustion. Benjamin's eyes followed the dark streaks along her side, the uneven way she favored one leg. Old wounds, maybe. New ones, too. She had come a long way, and whatever strength she once had was nearly gone. Then he saw what she was holding. Cradled against her chest was something small, wrapped in her massive arms. At first glance, it barely seemed real. A tiny shape, limp and unmoving, its head resting unnaturally still. The lantern revealed a childlike face beneath thin fur, eyes closed, mouth slightly open. A baby. Benjamin felt his breath catch. His first instinct was disbelief, but it passed quickly, replaced by something heavier. The way she held the child was unmistakable, careful, protective, the way any mother would. Their eyes met. There was no rage in hers. No warning. Only fear. Raw and unhidden. The kind that comes when there is nowhere left to go and only one chance remains. She took a small step forward, careful not to jostle the baby. Her gaze never left Benjamin's face, searching it, weighing him. In that moment, he understood something without needing words. She hadn't come to threaten him. She had come because she had no one else left to turn to. Benjamin's eyes went back to the small body in her arms. He leaned closer, just enough for the lantern light to fall across the baby's face. The chest barely moved. Each breath, if it came at all, was shallow and uneven. He didn't need training to recognize what he was seeing. Life was slipping away. The weight of that realization settled over him slowly. This wasn't a visit. It wasn't curiosity or chance. She had carried the baby a long distance, through rough ground and pain, holding on until there was nothing left to give. And she had brought the child here. To him. Benjamin felt the question rise in his mind, simple and unavoidable. Why his door? The answer followed just as quietly. He was the one who never chased, never fired, never left trash or traps behind. The one who walked the forest without trying to own it. Somewhere along the way, that had been noticed, the mother shifted her grip slightly, careful, precise. Her breathing was labored, but she made no sound. She was watching him closely, not with suspicion, but with hope. Thin, fragile hope. There was no room for panic. No place for shouting or sudden movement. Whatever choice was made here would shape everything that followed. Benjamin understood that as clearly as he understood his own name. He straightened and met her gaze again. His heart was beating hard now, but his hands were steady. He stepped back and opened the door wider, clearing the way into the house. It was an invitation, plain and unmistakable. For a brief moment, she hesitated. Then she lowered her head slightly, as if in acknowledgement, and took a careful step forward. The floor creaked under her weight as she crossed the threshold. Benjamin closed the door behind them, shutting out the cold and the dark, whatever was going to happen next. He knew one thing for certain. He had chosen not to turn away. Benjamin moved with purpose, though his thoughts felt weighed down. He guided the mother toward the small table near the stove, clearing space with careful motions. There was no plan beyond instinct. No handbook for a moment like this. Only what years of living, watching, and responding had taught him. He gestured gently, and she lowered herself just enough for him to see the baby more clearly. The child's skin beneath the thin fur felt cool to the touch. Too cool. Benjamin placed 2 fingers lightly against the small chest. The rise and fall were barely there, coming in short. Uneven bursts that seemed to pause for too long between breaths. He reached for a clean cloth and a blanket, warming them near the stove before wrapping the baby carefully. His movements were slow and deliberate, as if speed might do more harm than good. He remembered enough: keep the airway clear, maintain warmth, don't shake, don't rush. Simple things, but sometimes simple things were all that stood between life and silence. The mother never looked away. Her large body was tense, every muscle alert. When Benjamin adjusted the baby's position, her hands hovered close, ready to pull the child back if he caused pain. But she didn't interfere. She watched, trusted. Benjamin spoke quietly, more to steady himself than to be understood. He described what he was doing, each step measured and calm. The room felt smaller, the air heavier, as if time itself had slowed to watch. He listened for changes in the baby's breathing, counting without meaning to. 1, 2, pause, then a faint breath again. Each one felt like a small victory that might vanish at any moment. The mother leaned forward, her face close to the child's. A low sound escaped her, not loud enough to fill the room, but heavy with worry. Benjamin felt the pressure of that sound settle deep in his chest. He did everything he could think to do. And when there was nothing more left to try, he stayed where he was, hands steady, refusing to step away. Hope was still there, thin, fragile, but it was not gone yet. The baby's breathing grew weaker, the pauses between each rise of the chest stretching longer than before. Benjamin felt it before he fully understood it. Whatever strength the child had left was fading, slipping away despite every careful effort. The mother shifted slowly. With a tenderness that seemed impossible for a creature her size, she adjusted her grip and moved the baby closer to Benjamin's hands. Not abruptly, not forcefully. It was a deliberate motion, filled with meaning. An offering. Her fingers brushed his sleeve as she did it. The touch was light, almost hesitant. Then she lowered her head, bringing her face level with his, her eyes fixed on him. A sound came from her chest, low and unsteady. It wasn't a growl or a warning. It broke in the middle, catching on itself, as if she could not finish it. She made the sound again, softer this time. It carried no threat, only need. Benjamin felt his throat tighten. He had heard grief before, in hospital rooms and quiet kitchens, in the moments when words no longer mattered. This was the same. Stripped of language but unmistakable, she was asking him to try again. To do something, anything, because doing nothing was unbearable. Benjamin nodded without thinking. He placed his hands around the baby once more, feeling how small and fragile the body had become. He adjusted the blanket, brushed moisture from the tiny mouth, and leaned in close, listening for breath. The mother watched every movement, her body rigid with restraint. She did not interfere. She did not pull away. She waited. In that moment, Benjamin understood something that would never leave him. This was not about fear or legends of the unknown. This was a mother, standing at the edge of loss, willing to trust a stranger with the last thing she loved. And that understanding settled into him, heavy and permanent. The change came quietly. There was no sudden movement, no sharp break in the moment. Just the slow realization that the breaths Benjamin had been counting were growing farther apart. Too far apart. He pressed his ear closer to the baby's chest, listening past the crackle of the stove and the soft sounds of the house settling. What he heard or didn't hear told him what he had been trying not to admit. The rhythm was failing. The small body beneath his hands felt lighter somehow, as if it were already beginning to drift away. Benjamin straightened slowly. He did not speak. There were no words that could improve what was happening. He met the mother's gaze, and she seemed to understand before he did anything else. Her shoulders sagged just slightly, a movement so small it might have been missed by anyone else. Saving the child was no longer something he could promise himself. The knowledge settled in with a dull ache, not sharp, not sudden. Just heavy. Still, he did not step away. He remained where he was, hands steady, presence firm. He kept the baby warm. He kept listening. He stayed because leaving would have felt like abandonment, and that was something he refused to add to the moment. The room grew unnaturally still. Even the forest beyond the walls seemed to pause, as if the world itself understood the importance of what was unfolding. The mother lowered herself further, sitting fully now, the baby cradled between them. No one rushed. No one interfered. There was no fight left to be had, only witness. Benjamin felt a shared weight settle between them. Not spoken, not acknowledged, but real. It was the understanding that some moments are not meant to be fixed, only honored. And so they stayed together in the quiet, allowing what was coming to arrive in its own time. Time slowed to almost nothing. The baby's tiny chest made one final shallow rise, and then stilled. Benjamin felt it immediately, the absence of movement, the quiet that followed. There was no sound to mark the passing. No cry, no struggle, only stillness. The mother's eyes lingered on her child for a long moment. Then, as if afraid to let the silence become emptiness, she wrapped her large arms carefully around the baby and began to rock him gently. The motion was slow, almost ritualistic, carrying the weight of her grief without words. She cradled him as a parent would, and in that quiet, Benjamin understood the depth of her sorrow. He stepped back, giving them the space they needed. Every instinct told him to intervene, to comfort, to act, but he knew that the truest kindness in that moment was presence without intrusion. The room seemed to hold its breath, the only sound the subtle rustle of the blanket, and the faint creak of the floor beneath. Her Benjamin's hands hung at his sides. His chest ached, not with fear, but with the sharp, hollow weight of empathy. The life that had been entrusted to him was gone, and yet the way she honored it softly, quietly, fully made the grief feel shared. Not empty. The mother's low hums, broken and uneven, filled the space. It was a sound of mourning, of love, and of release. Benjamin could not speak. There was nothing to say that would reach the depth of that moment. He simply watched, silently, as she held the baby close. In that heartbreak, there was a strange peace. A final act of care. And in it, Benjamin understood that some endings, though sorrowful, could still be beautiful. Benjamin moved slowly, gathering what he could find to create a resting place for the baby. A small wooden box from the shed, a few soft cloths, and carefully stacked stones from the edge of the porch. Every motion was deliberate, measured. Nothing flashy. Nothing unnecessary. Only what was needed to honor the small life that had passed. He worked quietly, aware of the mother's gaze upon him. She stood close, her large frame still tense, yet patient. Every placement of stone or fold of cloth was met with a slight nod or tilt of her head, an acknowledgement of understanding. She did not interfere, but she watched as if she knew he was speaking a language beyond words, a language of care and respect. Benjamin arranged the blanket so the baby would lie flat and comfortable. The box was set gently on the floor, cushioned and warm. The stones were placed around it, not as barriers, but as markers. Small reminders that someone had witnessed. Someone had cared. The mother lowered her arms for a moment, letting Benjamin finish the simple task. He stepped back, taking a moment to look at the tiny resting place. It was minimal, yet meaningful. It was dignity in its purest form, offered without ceremony, without fanfare. She reached forward, brushing a gentle hand along the edge of the blanket, her eyes softening. In that quiet exchange, Benjamin felt a connection, a shared understanding between two beings from entirely different worlds. Grief, respect, love. It needed no words. And in that stillness, he realized that some acts, small and humble as they might be, could carry the weight of humanity itself. The mother Bigfoot lingered for a moment. Her large frame bowed over the tiny resting place. Then, with a deliberate, almost ritualistic motion, she reached down and placed a small smooth stone beside the baby. It was not random, it had been chosen carefully, perhaps from the path she had traveled. A simple, quiet offering. Benjamin watched, heart tight, as she stepped back. Her eyes met his, and for the first time, there was something almost human in their depth. Gratitude, recognition, and trust. No words were spoken. No gestures shouted for attention. Yet the meaning was unmistakable. She turned slowly, pausing at the doorway, glancing once more toward the baby. Then she stepped outside into the forest, her figure dissolving into the shadows and the mist of early morning. The world seemed to exhale in that silence. Benjamin remained still, breathing unevenly, feeling the weight of what had just passed. That simple stone, that brief glance, that quiet departure, it said more than words ever could. It was a moment that would stay with him forever. A gesture so small, yet so profound, that even in the stillness, it spoke volumes. And in that silence, anyone witnessing it would understand. Some encounters leave you speechless, not because of fear, but because of the depth of what it means to truly connect. She stepped back from the doorway, her massive form moving with careful grace. There was no rush, no glance over her shoulder beyond the faintest acknowledgement of Benjamin's presence. Then, without a sound, she slipped into the forest. The trees swallowed her figure, the soft morning mist hiding the trail she had taken. For a few long moments, the world felt suspended, as if holding its breath in respect. Then, slowly, the forest returned to its ordinary rhythm, the whisper of wind through the pines, the distant call of a bird, the quiet rustle of leaves underfoot. Benjamin remained where he stood, lantern dim in hand, heart heavy yet calm. He felt the weight of what had occurred settle in him. His house was quiet again, but nothing would feel the same. He had witnessed something extraordinary, something beyond understanding. The forest, the night, and the small life that had touched his doorstep had left a mark. Benjamin knew that his life had shifted in ways words could never capture. And in that silence, he found a deep, gentle closure. Benjamin never spoke of that night to anyone. Not a neighbor, not a friend, not even in passing. The memory remained his alone, carried quietly in the folds of his daily life. He thought often of the mother, of the baby, and of the trust placed in him without words. Compassion had crossed the line between species, leaving him with a sense of awe he could never fully explain. Even in silence, the lesson stayed. Some encounters are too profound for words. And long after the moment passed, the quiet understanding of that night lingered in him and would linger in anyone who could truly feel it.